Let's get started on our topic, which is evaluating the success of counseling function in schools. We really thought about this topic because we've been speaking about training of counselors, and now that we are sort of beginning to make some presence there, we also thought it's important to align. Thank you. We also thought it's important to align the school leadership so that just like any other function in school, counseling gets its due acknowledgement, the presence is nurtured so that the results can be optimized. And we'll speak about everyone's experience of results, of measurement, and of evaluation. Because it's in comparison to other functions, academic functions, we realize that can you really benchmark scores? Like in your English department, you can say, okay, we're doing better now, our averages have gone up. What is the benchmark, or what are some of the benchmarks for counseling? So here we are with the panel to take this discussion forward. And Barry, I'd like to start with you, with your comments on, with your quick reflection on why did counseling start, why, and when counseling started in your school? And at this moment, do you think, as a head of school, as a person who's in a position of, authority in the school and the counseling department, do you have a shared vision, or do you have some understanding or commonality in the vision of what we are trying to do with counseling in your school? So maybe a reflection from you, followed by Sudha ma'am and then Ramya.
Okay, so in a nutshell, for us, we're a school that has about, this year we'll have about 140 in our graduating class and across the both campuses. And most of our students, probably about 85 to 90%, will head overseas. So we've had a counselling department in our school for 10 plus years, and the main driver for us is, like most counsellors are going to be saying, we're looking for best fit, but we're also looking for the questions you just raised before is, how do we judge whether our counselling department is doing well? Are we basing it on where kids are going? Are we basing it on how many students are being accepted at their first university? Are we basing it on scholarships? And at the moment, we're having lots of discussions about how we judge ourselves internally to see that whether we can say to ourselves that we're doing a great job.
Thank you. Sudha ma'am, over to you. So what is the vision of counseling at the Sri Ram School? You're on mute, ma'am. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes. So thank you, Amrita. Great beginning, and really an honor and pleasure to be here. So, the Sri Ram schools were set up with one vision in mind, and that was to create a happy space for children. When we started thinking of initiating the setting up of the Career Counseling Center at school, that was the underlying philosophy even there. Because we knew through creation of CCC, that we call, we would be creating another channel of communication with students, creating another pillar of support for them that would help to bring out the best in them. Point number one. Additionally, we also knew that that would definitely make them a little more happy, because we all know knowledge is empowering. But eventually, what children are able to do with that acquired knowledge adds so much more. So that was basically the guiding principle behind setting up of the Career Counseling Center at the Sri Ram School. One little anecdote I would like to share here with you, Amrita. So, at least 10 to 12 years ago, when one of our students got placed, probably one of the first students that got placed at the Ivy League colleges, and when we called her back and we wanted to ask her how the journey was, she had, lots to share. The first and foremost thing that she mentioned was that she was meeting somebody outside school because there wasn't enough support in school. This was the beginning of a relationship with an individual who she had no trust on. She did not know the person except for the qualifications of the individual. Now, as far as my understanding of career counseling goes, a career counselor is like a mentor for the child. And therefore, a relationship should be built on trust and faith. So we thought that if in school we were able to create a wing that would help sync the passion, the personality, and the aspirations of the child with his or her career goals, that would be the best way forward. And that, Amrita, was the beginning of the Career Counseling Center at the Shriram Schools.
Thank you. So interesting to sort of note, Barry, you spoke about some of the outcomes and worked backward towards the process of, how the school is getting there. And here we have Sudha ma'am talking about the process and then its intended outcomes, right? So it's interesting to note two perspectives which are sort of very holistic, and but the start and the end, and how you sort of explain that or bring that out brings a slight difference in orientation. Yeah. And moving on, I'm going to pass it on to Ramya to talk about the vision of counseling at your school.
Hi, thank you, Amrita. And I really have a bit of an imposter syndrome with this panel, such eminent personalities. But I think in our school, it is still, it's evolving. Okay, so our counseling department is about 3.5 years old, and initially it was really very much supposed to be a logistical function, right? Because they said, oh, many kids are applying abroad, we need somebody to do the transcripts and all that. And I think once that first batch graduated, we realized that really, I mean, it isn't sufficient, right? I mean, you do have to understand and help students, in terms of picking the majors, how do you find the right fit universities? And then that soon evolved into, okay, it's not just, you can't just say, go pick a major, it has to start earlier. And so it was very much an organic evolution of a 4-year curriculum. So, by the end of year 2 is when that vision came together, because everyone was more aware of the need for it, right? So, it was a bit working backwards, right? To say, okay, in order to be successful in finding the right universities, what do you need to do in 11th grade? What do you need to do in 10th grade? And slowly teachers also began to realize that their role is not just writing a recommendation letter, but they could do so much more in terms of connecting their subject with careers out there. The administration realized that it's not just enough to be that, sort of the person, the function that's just doing the logistical part, but you can play a very, very important role in shaping the whole process. And so now we do have a shared vision, which is, the ultimate goal is to make sure the students are happy and find something that is the right fit for them truly.
Okay, Rami, I'm going to pick on something that you mentioned. You spoke about the school realized that there's so many kids who are going abroad, so they needed transcripts, and so it started as a logistical facilitation, if I may use that. So now that you've been a counselor at the school for about 2 to 3 years, am I correct on that? Yeah. Can you tell me one change in the perception of counseling at your school? What kids were going out anyway, right? Kids were still going to college. So what is different now versus 3 years ago? Maybe quickly one difference, and Sudha ma'am and Barry, I come back to you with this question too.
I think they realize, everyone is aware that there is a function like this in school, because we've now started doing whole school sessions, where there's one day where we invite all the parents of all grades, whoever wants to come, and it's recorded, it's out there on YouTube, or to talk, for example, about studying in different regions. Ninth graders know, they're actively thinking about, okay, what is out there? Should I be talking to people about, should I be going and talking to someone who's a doctor if I'm thinking I want to be a doctor? So there's just a heightened awareness of the things that they should be doing. It's not something that's pushed back to 11th grade or 12th grade.
Okay, so to sum that up, you said awareness, greater awareness, and probably awareness at a younger age as well. Are those your two main points? Okay, Sudha ma'am, yes. Over to you.
So when it started, we had to proactively push it actually down the throat of parents and children to say, listen, here there is a counseling cell, please come connect. But now we have to, from time to time, restrain children from running between classes to tell them, listen, they are here, wait, you will get your turn. So probably that's one big shift. But of course, I've asked students, and their perspective is, since the Career Counseling Center has been set up, they know that there is a structure that's going to be provided to them, because you know how teenagers are. They plan a lot, but they keep procrastinating. So they say that through their interaction with their counselors, they are able to work under a framework with proper timelines, and that brings about efficiency in the way they function. So that's a major shift versus children earlier who didn't know where to go, who to go to, what to ask, how to go about with what they were planning to do ahead in life.
So a more organized experience and a more synced experience for the students. Okay, over to you, Barry.
I think for us, where we are at the moment is trying to get the expectations of the different stakeholders in alignment. What the counsellors are trying to do is get best fit, but then we have the expectations from certain parents who want a certain path. We have students who want a certain path. We have board members who want a certain path. We have admin wanting a certain path, and it's trying to find that balance so that everyone is satisfied. And I think that's where this particular forum or discussion topic is really pertinent for us at the moment.
Thank you. So now you say that counseling's been there. Yeah, we know that something's happening, but we want to know how is it being perceived by different stakeholders within the system. And just to sum up, yes, Barry, I cut you. So
No, you didn't. I was just going to say, trying to find a balance in the expectations of the different stakeholders, because each one of them is valuable.
Super. So this just builds a lovely trajectory for us. So Ramya spoke about greater awareness, starting earlier, so the ma'am brings in more organization, more there being a plan, steps being laid out. And then Barry, you probably take it to the next stage, that now we are saying these two things are happening at our school. We are now at a stage where we are wondering, how is this whole evolution being perceived by different stakeholders? Okay, so since you mentioned different stakeholders, Barry, I want to just open this question in the chat box and for all the live audience as well. If you could, for all the virtual audience, if you could type in the chat box and tell us that in evaluation of counseling in the school system, who do you think is the most important stakeholder? And your choices are students, parents, the school staff and your colleagues, your leadership and administration, or the counselor. So the question, I repeat, is in evaluating counseling services within a school system, who is the most important stakeholder? Student, parent, school staff, leadership or administration, and counselor. I only see students. Anyone in the physical audience who has another stakeholder who would like to talk about another stakeholder? Please, if the mic could be passed here.
Counselor.
Hi, good afternoon. I think so. Parents and students both are equally important stakeholders, because in my experience what I've seen is that students are open to new ideas, new careers, whatever we tell them, but when it comes to convincing parents and putting our point through that, look, your child is interested in this, or his personality is like this, so you should rather look at other options rather than the traditional engineering and medical options, then there the main challenge and the main fun of the work comes.
Thank you for sharing. So here we have another viewpoint that parents are also important, and all the counselors in the house and all the school administration leaders in the house who've dealt with a difficult parent, I think it's time to patch your back. And since we're talking about parents, I'd like maybe Barry, if you could comment on what are parents really looking for from a counselor?
I think from my perspective, in my experience, parents are wanting counsellors to listen to them. They're wanting to listen to them, listen to their student. They want to feel engaged in the process. They want to be part of the journey. It's interesting that everyone put down the students, but this isn't, in my belief, a student and counsellor decision. It's a whole team's decision to get students to where they want to be, and it's a long process that parents need to be involved in. They need to feel comfortable. They need to be heard. They need to be able to have someone who understands their perspective as well as the student's perspective, and to be able to work with both of them so that parents and students are in alignment. Our journey as counsellors is not to make the decisions for the parents, but to help them and their child get to where they want to be. But having the parents are going to be paying. We won't say paying. We'll just say they're investing a lot of time and money into this kid's their child's process, and so, or their child's journey. And so we need to make sure that they're feeling comfortable and knowledgeable, and that they're part of the journey all the way along.
Okay, so Barry, you spoke about parents wanting to be a part of the counseling process or being taken along the process with their child. And of course, we have comments in the chat box where counselors are mentioning their experience of, parents wanting the counselor to pass on their message to them. And sometimes I know as a counselor, I've sometimes experienced that I've requested a parent to make their child understand my point of view as a counselor. So I think that there is also this whole balance of, authority, power, information source. Should I listen to is the parent feeling comfortable with the counselor's advice? Is there an opinion which is of agreement or which is of disagreement? And how well informed are the parents by the counselors as well in this whole
and
process?
Sometimes I think we're a mediator between the parents and the students, helping the parent understand where the students are coming from, but also helping the student understand where the parents are coming from. And so that they end up with they come to an agreement in which destination they're heading.
Yeah, so I'm going to steal a comment that, I used to, I'd heard Sudha ma'am say often at school, and she'd say, that's why you have counselor, the word counselor attached to career and college counseling, because it's not just about giving them information. It could just simply be conflict resolution. It could just be listening, and just sort of being the mediator, as you said, Barry. Thank you for covering the, parent expectation out there. And I think we've all, in our different capacities, had those kind of situations. So now moving on to, really the school leadership. And since that didn't come up in the chat, both Sudha ma'am and Barry, you being school leaders, if Sudha ma'am, you could share, what do you as a head of school expect from the counseling department at school? What is your expectation?
So Amrita, as part of the school leadership team, for me, the parent, the student, and the counselors themselves, all three are equally important. And the reason I say so is because they are equal stakeholders. And just as for beauty, they say that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. Similarly, efficiency of the career counseling cell lies in the eyes of the stakeholders. That's my take on it. And the reason I say so is because for parents, it is not just about value for money. Mm-hmm. It is also about the fitness of purpose. It could be that one transformative decision or choice or guidance that has been given by the career counselor that can create magic in the life of their wards. For students, it is simple. And they are very, very important stakeholders. As you saw in the chat box, there were so many answers which said students, students, and students. Because everything is about the students. You know, the entire creation of that special cell or wing in school is to benefit the child, the student. And for students, what is most important is the ease of connect, the efficiency of connect. And also, if both their short term and long term goals are being met, you know. And when I say short term, I mean so the immediate college admissions or the choice of subjects or their performance in some exam or tests. But the long term also, if they have built a relationship based on trust and faith, as I began by saying, they definitely would want to seek their guidance and help even later on after they have graduated from college. But I definitely do not want to leave out the counselors, because for me, the counselors are very, very important. The first and foremost question that I keep asking myself is the voice of the counselor being heard? A very simple question. A basic question. Do they have a comfortable space to work from, where they can discharge their duties in a professional manner from? Are they interested in training? That's a question that I keep asking myself. And are we giving them enough support to upgrade their skills? Have we allocated enough resources for them, again, to discharge their duties efficiently? So these are some of the questions that I keep asking myself, and that we ask amongst ourselves in the leadership team, to ensure that the Career Counseling Center discharges its duties efficiently. Because only if we are able to meet the requirements of all three stakeholders, we will have an efficient counseling center in school.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think to summarize, you spoke about infrastructure and training as provisions by the school leadership for building the capacity of the counselor. And you also spoke about, the ease with which students are able to connect being the perspective, that you would benchmark counseling at from a leadership point of view. Ramya, I'm going to jump to you, and you being in the capacity of a counselor, how would you rate your own performance? So how would you rate a counselor? What can they use?
Okay. I think later on we will be talking, I know, about the qualitative and quantitative metrics, but I just want to really, underpin that there has to be an agile methodology to this, right? Because every school is different. Your ratio of counselor to students is different. What I can do with my graduating class size of 30 is not somebody who has a graduating class size of 200 can aim to do. They don't have that bandwidth. And so some of it, when you rate yourself, is about generally just being kind to yourself and being realistic, right? And it's an evolving process. That's really what I want to underline, at least, the way I see it. In my first year, there were a lot of challenges. I was a new counselor at a new school, setting up a counseling cell. And so, at the end of the year, the ratings were more like the performance review was more, did I screw up? I mean, it was really literally just that. And so, but there was reflection on what could have been done better. Did we set up processes? How smoothly did they go? And so a lot of those became then the metrics for year two, right? What needs to be in place that could have avoided that last minute rush? And then, in year two, when there was more comfort with the 12th grade processes, then it was like, how well is your curriculum? Do you have a curriculum in place? How well is that functioning for the lower grades? And that's where the stakeholders start to come in too, because, then you're involving the parents. You have to involve the administration so that they can give you more time with the students, more freedom to set the curriculum and things like that. So, and then, it really evolves, right? And then next year, if we hire another counselor as our school grows, then team dynamics will come into play. So when I rate myself, I will also look at, okay, how well did I function with the other counselor? Was it genuinely a team effort? Were the duties shared properly? So I think bottom line is it really has to be customized when you rate yourself, and it has to evolve. It has to be an agile methodology based on some sort of a feedback loop and reflection.
Thanks, Ramya. So, I'm just going to take a moment and, pick the fact that we've all sort of spoken about our experiences from different schools who are at very different stages in the counseling process or in the counseling evolution. So I know, Ramya, your school's probably the youngest, right? And probably then Sriram and Oberoi in terms of, the year in which the school was established and so that which, which impacts at which, potentially at which counseling stage the school may be at. So not only is agility important, I think it's also important to know, okay, this is my first year, I'm getting started, so maybe what I'm evaluated on for my first year is going to be different from what I'm going to be evaluated on 3 years, and what am I going to be evaluated on as a single counselor versus how will the school leadership evaluate a team versus an individual, if it's a counseling team versus an individual. So, those are also two very interesting dynamics that come up, agility and the stage of counseling in your school. Because if we also noticed, all panelists are talking about process, outcomes, this becoming easier, comfort, best fit, all, we are kind of switching between outcomes and processes, and that also I think comes up from the stage at which we are, and also the where we are placed, right, in our school. What is the chatter of the school around? Are students talking about, hey, I really enjoyed my interaction, or is the emphasis on how many top universities did the school secure this year from the students? So I think what this really brings to light is all these conversations are shaped up, they are dynamic, so they're shaped up by what the school leadership is focusing on, and the other way around also, the culture that the counselor is also trying to build. So hence, we come to really, so how do we really measure this? We've spoken about different perspectives, but now coming really deep dive into what are we going to use to evaluate, right? And before we jump into that, I'm just going to, ask the audience here, if any of you would like to share in your practice in schools, what makes for a happy student from a counseling perspective? That'll really help us close this discussion and move into maybe a matrix that we could come up with together to make sure we cover all of this. So anyone in the audience would like to share what makes for a happy counselor, for a happy student?
Thank you so much. So I think, in my opinion, and since I've spent a lot of time in school space, I think there are some parents who come out and say to the school that, you know what, I really didn't know that this is what my son or daughter wanted to do, and it was through a process. So I think the emphasis has to be on process and not the outcome. I mean, you can't have just the number of the universities which must show on your website that students have been placed, based on the ratings of the university. I think the emphasis slowly has to move to a mindset where people are celebrating that, yes, children are going to places in the right places. I think that is something which is not very tangible and can't be directly measured through some processes. But definitely, if you put your heart and brain at the right places, we can definitely be somewhere close.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Andrew, you bring about how what makes for a happy student is a student who lines up at the right place, but also what was the journey in reaching that place, right? So, and how this may not be tangible, right? So, let's try and see if we can build in some tangibles or some quantitative measures of success of the counseling function in school. So from all the panelists, I know I'm skipping our order a little in interest of time as well. So Barry, first beginning with you, what would be 2 quantitative measures of success of counseling in your school?
Quantitative. One of the things that we discussed that I think was really interesting for me is that the idea that the process allows kids, and I'm not quite sure how to measure this, but the entire process that may start in grade 8 or 9 allows kids to increase both their or keep motivated and increase their academic performance, but also their performance in other areas outside the classroom. So you've got these students who are they're thinking long term, but the mere fact that they're on this journey and they're starting to focus on what do they need to get there allows them to engage in more rigorous academic activities, as well as a wider breadth, or maybe even a deeper level of understanding with regards to their non-academic endeavors. It may be in music, or maybe in dance, or robotics, or whatever else. And I don't think I've really answered your question really well there, Amrita, but there needs to be something that allows people to see that this process is bigger than just putting in transcripts, recommendations, and deciding on a college.
Barry, I think that was,
these offshoots.
So just to make it clearer and and make sure that I've understood it correctly as well, you're talking about how effective counseling will have the spillover effect or the fringe benefit of higher academic engagement, or higher engagement even in performing arts, or interests of the student, because they sort of now know what to anchor towards. So if they now know through this whole counseling process that maybe I'm anchored to do these two things, and they can sort of work backwards and say that, okay, I need to be good at this to get there, or I need, and then start getting invested in that process and with increased ownership. So I think
it opens their eyes to new areas, and there'll be initiatives that they engage in because of they've started in this process. So there's all of this other, like you say, spillover, but I think sometimes it's not just a spillover, it's a flood over.
Yeah, so higher engagement and higher student motivation could be some very quantitative, probably measures of success of counseling as well. I don't know how much quantitative, but yeah, maybe academic engagement, if it should start showing up in results as well, right? Sudha ma'am, true quantitative measures of success of counseling in your school.
So I'm going to just say exactly what Barry said a little differently, and maybe this will help to quantify the data. If there are too many children missing their appointments with the counselors, that's an interesting data that's coming to me and telling me a lot about the counseling process. And Amrita, you know that there is one factor that I always keep talking about, and that is the pull and the push factor. So when there are appointments with counselors, there should be a pull factor. And I don't think that a push factor actually works. And hence I say that if they are missing their appointments, and through the class teachers or through the parents, if reminders have to be issued to them, then there is something that we definitely need to address. There is a problem. The second thing that I want to mention is, again, if there are too many parents highlighting matters, escalating matters to me, again, that's a quantitative data which I need to look at very, very deeply and understand the reason why. Because after so many years, I definitely believe that more or less most of the things are on autopilot and do not require too much of my intervention. But if in a particular year, for any reason, or with a particular counselor, if there are too many cases that are being highlighted to me, if parents want to talk to me about that particular case, then that means that there is something that needs to be addressed. So these would be my two quantifiable data emerging from there.
That's great. So you're talking about number of appointments going up or going down. Either way is a quantitative measure of success of counseling. And of course, you're also talking about in the number of complaints or concerns being raised in one particular year, or for one particular person, or for one particular country, etc. Inability to handle those kind of cases. So those become two quantifiable measures. Ramya, over to you. When you're making your report, what would be the two quantitative measures you'd report your boss on? Boss for two.
So one was the accessibility, which Sudha ma'am had mentioned. But also in accessibility, I would also say for myself, it would be for the same children coming back again and again, because there are a handful of motivated kids. And then there are kids you really, that push versus pull thing. So really, are you reaching every student, right? And it doesn't always have to be equally, but are you at least reaching every student, right? Similarly, and value added sessions that we do, but in our school, I mean, I'm always mindful also, or I try to be mindful that it's spread across, because parents will call me up on that sometimes, like, hey, even in some of your talks, you're always saying US, and then I have to catch myself. So in terms of quantitative, I think I would also look at, when you're doing value added session, does it tend to be skewed towards a particular region? Even if the majority of your students are applying to the US, I think it is your duty to let them know that there are other destinations, to let them know there are other careers. And similarly, the majors that they're applying for, do those reflect like the diversity of, what's out there, or what should, is it really diverse, right? Or are 90% of your students going in for engineering? In which case, are you even giving them, are you giving them the guidance that they should be getting, to know that there are other things out there that would be a good fit for them? And sorry, this is more than two, but also, like, one of the things that we've encountered recently is kids coming in 11th grade after having picked a few subjects and then saying mid-year, these subjects don't work. And it's really, this is the first time, I mean, like I said, some of it is evolution, for me, but that'll become part of my metric next year, is that, are we giving them the guidance to select subjects so that those change requests are not that frequent?
So Ramya, I'm going to sum that up and tell me if I got it all right. So you spoke about if the same students are coming back to you, so that sort of shows that they're believing in, or they're benefiting by the conversation that you're having with them. At the same time, you also mentioned a more number of students. Is it that only those are coming back, or is that also, again, sorry for my lack of vocabulary here, but has the spillover effect of, hey, I had a great session with Ramya ma'am, why don't you go meet her as well? So that's another friend, coming to you who's probably not been coming otherwise. So that may also happen. So you're talking about consistency of students coming in, you're talking about more access, more number of students coming in than those who actually do make the effort of coming in, who are motivated anyway. You also spoke about, is there going diversity now in the kind of countries, the kind of programs that students are applying to, or at least are informed of, even of, if not applying to? And that's where you sort of, assess yourself, that if every year everything is going in the same direction, is it lack of exposure, and am I giving them enough? So that becomes another thing for you to think about. And the last thing that you mentioned is the subject choice. How many of them are, closing their subject choices in the first round and actually adhering to those choices? So the number of, requests that you get to go back and forth between subjects in grade 11 would again be a benchmark of the advising that they would have received in grade 9 and 10. I want to sort of open this up again to the, physical audience and say, if over and above this, can you share any quantitative measure that's used in your school? Will you just wait for the mic, because then the virtual audience can't hear you?
So it's not used in our school at the moment, but I listened to the conversation, and agency is something that I think that we absolutely need to tap into. This is a process that we should be in. You use the word engagement. We're working with the young people, but it's not something that we're doing to them. It's something that we are empowering them to do with us. And I think we can collect quantitative data on agency. The other point that I would like to make, that I've heard mentioned in a couple of sessions, is this notion that we need to be holding young people's hands much earlier in the conversation and guiding them over an extended journey, rather than focusing on the last 2 years of the journey, when for many kids perhaps this is a little bit late.
So if I'm going to sum again, so when you spoke about agency, are you talking about student agency and student ownership in the process being an important benchmark of success of counseling? Super. And actually, I'd like to pause here and say that I'm glad you brought this out, because suddenly we see it, in school they're used to so much of spoon feeding or hand holding, and it's a complete change to what is expected at university. So if we are truly measuring success of counseling, I think we should also be the transition that we are helping them in this making from school to university could be a great benchmark of success of counseling. My question to you, I have a follow-up question. When you say agency, do you think there is a quantitative way to measure that?
I think if we were creative, we could think of ways of quantifying that. I don't think that that's an impossible challenge.
Super, thank you. And maybe we could all think together and come up with some of these as well. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Yes.
We just spoke about helping the students in making that transition from high school students to college students. So basically, what I have done sort of in my school. So I have developed this module on personal branding. And because what I've understood is that students being students, they are used to a particular kind of behavior, whether it is communicating with students, whether writing, teachers or writing to them or talking to each other. So various touch points of communication, whether it is written communication or importance of networking or verbal communication or body language. So there are little bits and pieces available on the internet, but there is nothing which collaborates and joins everything together. So I did make a presentation on personal branding where I covered all the touch points of a human being's communication to the other person, and where I taught the kids that how you are supposed to speak to people, what is the importance of attitude, how you should form an email signature. It's as basic as that. How you should write email, or what is the importance of having white spaces in between writing a piece of text. And what I've thought is that maybe my parameter of success of counseling, when I talk about helping the students in transitioning, would be that how many students are following the pointers which I have mentioned.
Okay, thank you. So, you actually bring about an important point where you spoke about, you have different bits and pieces of information available on different things over the internet, over, everywhere now. There's almost a stage of being overwhelmed by information. So a crucial role of the counselor is also how you synthesize it and put it together to personalize it to the student context. And each student's context may be different from another student even within the school, right? So you may probably want to talk to someone about writing an email, whereas talking to another student about how to sift information on a university website. So, so thank you for sharing that. And again, is this something that can be measured? So I'm going to now sort of move to, back to our panelists and say, and I'll start with Barry here. Barry, tell me, and we'll open this to the audience as well. So we've all spoken about so far on, what are different perspectives of success of counseling in school. We've spoken about some of the quantitative measures that can lead us to that. We can't hear you, Barry.
Oh, sorry, Amrita. You went off and we couldn't hear.
Okay. So I think, so my question to you is, we've spoken about some of the measures of success, what we all think needs to be measured. We've spoken about some of the ways we can measure those. Okay, like some of the quantitative, like you look at number of appointments, you look at our same students coming, you're looking at, parent involvement, you're looking at academic success. Now tell me when something doesn't work out. Right, something goes really wrong with the student placement, with the way a student is feeling, with if a parent comes to you with a complaint, how do you assess who you're going to blame, who you're going to bring to your office?
Gosh, I suppose I don't like the word who we're going to blame. I think we should be looking at somebody mentioned about process, and I don't know whether it was in the discussion or in the chat I've been reading, but we've got to be reflective on the process all the time, and quite often we don't know why a kid hasn't got into the university that they wanted to get into. There may be a whole lot of reasons for it, but trying to work out who to blame. If everyone's invested in the process and are comfortable with the process and understand the the dynamics when it comes to how students are accepted at the different universities they're applying to, people aren't necessarily going to blame anybody. They're just going to understand that this is part of the environment that they're in. This is part of the journey. There are going to be some things that work out. There are going to be some things that don't. And so if everybody's part of that and understand that process, we reduce stress. And that, again, it's one of those things that if we're looking at trying to make sure that people are comfortable and understand the process, the stress levels of everybody, students, counselors, parents, is going to be reduced. Again, Amrita, I'm not exactly sure whether I've answered your question, because I find this area really sort of complex in trying to sort of pinpoint exactly what it is that is going to be able to measure the ability of the counsellor.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So, and why I asked this question, Sudha ma'am, before we take your point of view, is just to highlight how complex assessing success of counseling in school can be, unlike the other functions. So when you don't know, like sometimes you get a headache, you know why you're getting a headache, either because your power has changed, you're getting migraine, you haven't eaten. You can say that these are the 5 possible reasons, and identify it. Is it really that objective, that clear when you're assessing counseling in school? And Sudha ma'am, over to quickly 30 seconds your view, and we try to then wrap up and take some questions as well.
So if anybody has to be blamed, then it has to begin with the leadership of the school. So me first, and then anybody else. But honestly, nobody should be blamed, cannot be blamed, because it's not, everything is not about quantifiable data when it comes to counseling. There is a lot of qualitative bits involved here. For example, a child may have the potential, may have been guided to become an engineer, but the social construct may not allow. Maybe the environmental factors are playing a role because of which the child cannot become an engineer. Maybe the child is trying to honor the parental preferences. Hence, he or she does not want to become an engineer. So nobody can be blamed. There are lots of gray areas, and if at all, then it has to be joint responsibility of all stakeholders.
Thank you. So I saw some of the chatter in the chat box talking about setting, management expectations. And this is recorded, so you can play Sudha ma'am if you are in trouble next time. That was just on a lighter note. And we're going to quickly move to, really summarize the discussion and talk about, what is the one qualitative measure that you always sort of keep track of, and how do you get this information? Because quality, and I want to bring about here that how sometimes it could just be grapevine, or it could just be, just one incident going off and then that becoming, the character of that person in that organization, or that becoming bigger than it is meant to be. So if you're really banking on qualitative, measure or a qualitative benchmark, if all 3 of you, going one by one, starting with Ramya, share one qualitative measure that must be in, measuring success of counseling, and how would you source that? So we go over that really quickly and we wind up in the next 2 minutes.
Okay, I think processes, it's been spoken enough, but I am a big process fan. And so the way to measure it would be things like, for example, what percentage of your students applied at the last minute or did miss the deadlines, things like that. But and on other issues about whether it was stress-free, which is another, particular reason to have good processes, that has to be through some sort of a survey. Many schools do exit surveys of students.
Super. So you're saying the counseling process has to be, how stressful or stress-free was that for both the student and the counselor, and maybe the parent as well, right? And that could be measured by an exit survey. Thank you for sharing that. Sudha ma'am, over to you.
So I think storytelling should become a very, very powerful tool, because storytelling, as in when the student goes to the counselor and takes him or her through his life's journey, that says a lot about the student. And that definitely, it's a qualitative data, but yet it says a lot, and it can definitely throw up interesting data to mull about.
Thank you. Barry, over to you.
I would just, I would really emphasize the some sort of satisfaction survey from the students and the parents. And it may not be just at the exit, because that's after it's all done. You may want to do that on a more regular basis, say at the end of each year for the grade 9s, the grade 10s, the grade 11s, grade 12, to see whether they're satisfied with the process and whether they're happy with the journey. And that survey could be, simple, or it could be more in depth to find out how many kids are going to outside counselors, going to places outside the school. But a satisfaction survey of some description of both parents and students, because they're the people who are the major stakeholders here in the process, needs to be done on a regular basis.
Okay, so
Actually, Amrita, can I just take 2 seconds to add to that?
Yes,
Some of it may
please.
not even have to be a survey. If you have, for example, things you're doing with 9th graders, by the time they come to 12th grade, some of that should be evident in how they select, their subjects or their majors. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, if you're planning your curriculum in a way that you feel that you're doing something at grade 9 because it has implications for something that they'll use in class 11. So pretty much like it should pretty much follow the academic route in that sense, that you teach phonetics first, then you teach 3-letter alphabet words, and then you get to more complex words, and they should be able to do that if they got the phonetics right in the first place. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. And I know
If I could also
yes,
just come
please,
in
Sudha
and
ma'am.
bring in my storytelling bit back here to say this is the kind of story that the counselors should be listening to from their students, because that's going to tell them a lot about the processes, whether it's working, it's not working, where the pitfalls are, what's going well for students. So that's why storytelling should become, that is, self-reflection for the student, and of course sharing with the counselor.
Okay, and I know we ditched the slides also today completely. So I know I have the slide open on my system, and I'm going to use all your examples to summarize. So just for everyone, who's joined us virtually and physically here. So, all our 3 panelists spoke about different parameters, and that was a function of what role they're in. So whether they're in leadership or whether they're in the counselor on the job, on the floor. So you saw that difference in, focus, a slight difference in the focus, or the way they spoke about the same parameter as well was slightly different. And that also was reflective of how many years they've been in counseling. So has the school always had counseling? Are they new? It focused on, it brought that about as well. And it also spoke about agility. So if you keep all of these 3 things and, all the examples that were shared as well, ideally, there isn't a rubric or an evaluation or a matrix that one school can hand over to another school, but we thought we'll summarize with just maybe 6 important points. And the first could be, depending on which stage of counseling you're at, you define a balanced set of quantitative and qualitative parameters. For qualitative, you're looking at how you're sourcing that information. Once you have these parameters, you're also assigning weightages to it, right? And here I want to highlight why I say weightages, because in the chat I saw some schools are residential schools which spoke about parents not being involved and just the struggle of involving parents. So therefore the weightage that you would give to a parent experience will differ in that school versus a school which is not residential, where parents have frequent access, where there are lesser number of students, it's a more of an open door policy. So the weightage that you'd give hence to parents there would be a little different. So once you identify your parameters, a good balance between quantitative and qualitative, the next is what weightages you will give to all of this. The other is, how frequently are you going to report all of this? As a counselor or as a management, how often are you going to ask for a report? Who is reviewing this report? How is it being reviewed? Is there an opportunity to explain and have a conversation around that? That becomes important. What type of data are you going to use it? Are you going to have, a lot of times, I know you've probably seen that when you give out surveys, the response rate may be slow, maybe low. Is that also an indication? If not, is there a better way to get feedback? A lot of times students shy away from long surveys, right? So what can you do? Does that mean that you've not done a good job? And why should, we lose out because, students don't want to answer a long survey? So at what time are we taking that survey? How long those surveys are, also becomes important. So the type of data that you're going to use. For me, the most, and I know we've spoken, all of us actually have spoken about what are the trends and patterns this feedback or this data helps us establish. Are you sitting down, are you just saying that there's been an increase in the number of universities, the university fairs at our schools have got larger, the number of sessions we are doing is more. What is the impact of this? So is that help? Are you being able to put all of this together and establish a pattern or a trend? I know Ajay in the audience also spoke about, and Ramya also brought about, is everyone still going for one particular field? And is that because that's the social construct, as Sudha ma'am brought about? So I know the kind of choices that students in Delhi make versus this kind of choices that students in Hyderabad make, or versus Mumbai will also, that will also have the social construct has its own role to play there. So therefore, what are you, what is all of this data, when you're measuring all of this, how are you making sense of it? Is it really helping you establish a pattern or a trend? And if it is it also helpful in giving you a future direction? Because ultimately, in my opinion, the point of doing all of this is to get better, right? Or to increase access. Yeah. So that was, my conclusion on this. And I know we've run over times, but I want to quickly run over the panelists and, what would, Ramya, bring a smile to your face as a counselor? What comment, from whom should it come? How has it come? Or what would make you happy as a counselor?
From the student, hands down. Every year I get a few of those notes that I stick up and I love it. I put it on LinkedIn. It's like, I love it. I think for most counselors, I think that would be the indication that you're doing somewhat of, not for everybody, but you're doing a good job for at least some kids.
So then that's when even if your hair is graying, that's when you go to the salon and get the hair colored back, right? Okay, awesome. Barry, what makes you happy?
I think we're all going to probably say the same thing. But for me, it's not just the student; it's the families. That when families are satisfied with the process and they've found the process is far easier than what they thought it was going to be, and it wasn't so overwhelming, and that they've come through it with flying colors. That's what makes all of this a wonderful journey.
Yeah. So how comfortable was the ride?
Yes.
Yeah? Stress-free or stressful? Okay, Sudha ma'am, your comments.
So Amrita, career counseling is a non-medical and non-psychiatric intervention, and yet it is therapeutic and uplifting. And that is what brings a smile to my face.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your views. And please, if you're going to stay on for 2 minutes in the in this room, I know some of us may have to run to other sessions. And if you'd like to attend to the comments in the chat box, please feel free to do that. I thank you once again for joining me from Delhi, from Mumbai, and from Hyderabad. I had fun doing this. I hope you did too. And I hope the audience did as well. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'd really request you to fill in the feedback form, which will be on the app. Help us get better so that we can get better counseling to schools. Thank you and namaste, everyone.